You're listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast with Angela Henderson, episode 164. Hey there, you're listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast. My name is Angela Henderson, and on this show, we talk about improving your business, life, or both by having amazing and rich conversations with brilliant guests who will inspire you and who will give you tips and tricks to help you grow both in life and in business. Well, hey there, amazing human, and welcome back to another awesome episode of the Business Life Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ange, from Angela Henderson Consulting, where I'm an international award-winning business consultant and coach who has helped thousands of amazing women business owners to get all the pieces in place to have consistent 4- and 5-figure months and then on to 6- and 7+ figure years without burning out in the process. Now, procrastination. It's a real thing, folks, and it happens to each and every one of us. I mean, have you ever sat down to complete an important task for your business and then suddenly discovered you were up putting a load of laundry on or engrossed in the latest Nutella recipe? Or perhaps you suddenly realize that the dog needs to be fed, emails need to be answered, your ceiling fan needs dusting, or maybe you should go ahead and have lunch, even though it's only 11 a.m. Next thing you know, it's the end of the day and your important tasks remain unfinished. But what truly is procrastination? Are we born with it? That's not even a fake question. Legit. Are we born with it? Does our human design play a part in it? If procrastination plays a role in your life, then you will want to stick around because I'm bringing on to the podcast today the amazing Betsy and Laura, two fellow Canadians, might I add, from Luscious Hustle. And we're going to be chatting with you today about why you procrastinate. And hint, it's not laziness. And we're also going to explore questions like, does procrastination have anything to do with laziness? How does the epidemic or busyness play into procrastination? What is the real reason people avoid getting things done? And how does our brain and the wiring of our brain impact or not impact procrastination? And so much more goodness. But before we hop into this awesome episode, just want to let you know that this episode is specifically sponsored by my 12-month accelerator program, Profit Pillars. It is a program that shows you how to transform your business so that you can make more money and reach more people and have more time to enjoy your family and friends and put an end to burnout. This is a 12-month accelerator program specifically. It's not just a program, it's not just a course, and it's been specifically designed for women in business who are on their way to hitting their first 5-figure months and then on to 6-figure years without burning out. So you see, it could be a business owner who has a business idea, or they already have their business up and running, but they want to make more money, but just don't know how. In Profit Pillars, I'm going to be able to help you do this through one-on-one support, group coaching calls, guest experts, and so much more. Every single month, we've got a monthly live goal setting session. We've got monthly guest experts. We've got fortnightly hot seat calls. We've got monthly office hours. We have year-round access to the Profit Pillars Business Vault, daily support within the VIP community, a strategy session with me, other sessions with other business experts, live monthly mindset calls, and so much more. And seriously, ladies, for just $275 a day, $275 a month, which works out to simply $8 a day, you can join Profit Pillars and start making and creating a sustainable and profitable business. And if it isn't, then my question is, do you want to be where you're at this time next year? If Profit Pillars sounds like the right platform for you, head to my website, angelahenderson.com.au, click on the services tab on coaching program, or if you have any questions, make sure to send me a DM over at Angela Henderson Consulting or an email at info@angelahenderson.com.au. I look forward to seeing you inside of Profit Pillars. But for now, let's get into this amazing, amazing episode. All right, welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Gosh, yes. I mean, prior to recording, I was like, yes, I've got a Canadian in the house and I've got an American in the house. So I absolutely am so pumped to be here because one side of you guys have my favorite, which is dill pickle and ketchup chips back home in Canada. But then in the true US, I could eat the ranch dressing over there by the gallon. So I'm glad that you guys are representing. And at time of recording, we are going into the Olympics too, right? So again, what better thing to have you could say an Olympic Games between ranch and ketchup chips and dill pickle chips, because I love it. So it's so good to have you guys here today. I also love hearing the accents. I get a little bit lonely being a Canadian over here, but I've also lived in the US for a quarter of my life, so my accent's a little bit. So it's always fun hearing the accents from back home. So welcome to the show, ladies.
Oh, thank you so much.
Now, today we're talking about why you procrastinate. And as we said in the title, hint, it's not laziness But before we jump into this topic, I always like to ask a fun question to the guests so that the audience gets to know you a little bit better. And Betsy, I know you're from Pennsylvania. So my question to you is what is your go-to place in Pennsylvania?
Oh, my go-to place in Pennsylvania, probably Tim Hortons. I know that sounds really crazy. I live in the northeastern corner of Pennsylvania, and honestly, I think we have the only Timmy's like around because all the Canadians drive down on the highway by us. And honestly, if I had to pick a place to go to like get away, it would be Timmy's for coffee.
Tim Hortons, for those people, that's why I was a little bit surprised that it was you, Betsy, saying that and not Laura, because Tim Hortons equals Canada pretty much, right? Like there's a Tim Hortons on every corner of all Canada, streets, suburbs, small towns, etc. So yeah, and do you love the Timbits, so the small little donut holes?
I do actually. My dad was a huge Timmy's fan. We're actually Canadian, so I was born in Montreal, but I've lived down here.
Yay!
Yeah. So when Timmy's showed up around here, like, of course, and yeah, if you're American, it's like Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks is really the debate. But I love having a Tim Hortons in our town, and we don't even have a stoplight, but we have a Tim Hortons. So I consider myself really lucky.
So cool. And for you, Laura, back home in Canada, what would you say is your go-to place in Canada? If people on here who a lot of my listeners are from Australia, if you're like, this is where you have to go in Canada, where's your favorite go-to place?
Oh, well, I hate to say it because it's getting so busy, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention, living in Calgary, like the Rocky Mountains are just like right at our back door. Mm-hmm. And Banff, Lake Louise, Moraine Lake, any of those places. It's like they're so postcard picture perfect. It's sort of hard to even explain verbally, mm-hmm. like turquoise blue waters and like just pristine mountains, and it smells amazing, and it's so majestic and beautiful. And I always love going out to the mountains, and it's actually getting really busy though. Mm-hmm. It was kind of nice during the pandemic because there was no tourism. So mm-hmm. we kind of like got our province back a little bit to ourselves, which was enjoyable. But things are starting to open up again here. So it's going to get busy again. Mm-hmm. And they're actually starting to regulate it more because it's just so beautiful. Like people just even like Instagram influencers like come from all over the world to come and take pictures by this lake. Like it's just next level beautiful.
It is. And there's also an essence of calming once you start from the base of when you leave out of Calgary going into, right, making your way there.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
You're leaving that city life, and then you can feel like the crisp air. There's so many trees around. I mean, not to mention the wildlife, few deer, moose every once in a while, bears that like to also come when I was camping there at stages. But there's an essence of calm. What I found too is I love in Banff and like Louise in particular, the stores that are there on their main streets are just these fun, quaint little stores that you can just potter around for hours and get some really cool things. And I found it very hard in different parts of the world to just walk down and just be lost for a little while. So no, it is a very magical place.
Yeah, it really is.
For the record, it's my favorite place in Canada too. So
it is all right.
Answer. Yeah.
And so
it's like America, it's like Timmy's, and then in Canada, I'm like Lake Louise, Banff.
So now that we've just increased when the world can start traveling again, more tourism to there, it will be regulated even more. But it's an absolutely magical place. I mean, again, I'm biased, but you guys might be too, but Canada collectively is a wonderful country as a whole, right? So now listen, procrastination. I mean, let's be honest, ladies, we've all been there, sometimes daily. But what I've learned over the years, and it could be because as I get older, you get wiser, that we actually have more control of it than what we think. So I'm so excited to have you here today to be talking about why you procrastinate. And hint, it's not laziness. So for us, just to get started, I always like when we have a broader topic like this, so that we're all on the same page, I like to start with some of the very basic and fundamental questions. So my first question that I want to throw at is just how do you define procrastination?
Well, I mean, I think really basically, procrastination is like you're delaying the action or postponing something. And I think, everyone deals with this pitfall, right? And it's really so much, it's like, it's not so much that delaying taking action or postponing doing something is so bad. What it really is it becomes this source of shame and guilt. And we, as entrepreneurs, I think it's so easy to get into this downward energetic spiral and feeling really, really just starting to, get down on yourself when you fall into a loop or a regular pattern of procrastination. And, and of course it's, nothing happens in a vacuum. So when we start to procrastinate, it's, what happens? We're on social all the time. We're looking at what other people are doing, seeing what appears to be their constant action, their constant motion, their constant, this appearance of motivation to propel themselves forward. And you think like, what is wrong with me? Why can I not get off my butt and do these things? And yet at the same time, we have this like epidemic of busyness in our everyday lives, in our work and in our businesses. And so, for Betsy and I, like really deep diving on like what procrastination means. And we take a very different look at it from an energetic perspective, to really understand what that downward energetic spiral is, so that you can stop it in its tracks and not feel like you're gridlocked by it or you're trapped by it forever.
Do you think procrastination shows up in more, I guess what I'm looking at, say the entrepreneur space, for example, right? In your time of working with people, do you see it more prone in particular kind of demographics, or do you see it just like collectively equal spread across all parties? What are your thoughts around that?
I think it's pretty much evenly spread out. Like I don't see it in one particular area more than the other, but I do think that the procrastination piece, it sort of depends on where you're at in your journey, right? So like if you're really clear on what it is that you're trying to accomplish and you have clear intentions and you're energetically in a really good space, headspace, mindset, all those things physically, then the procrastination doesn't seem to take over the way that it does when you are overwhelmed. And I think, especially in a world like Laura was saying, where we have so much external stimulation, where we have so many things going on, we have so many platforms that we're being required to show up and partake in. Procrastination, it is a form, it's an extension of the overwhelm, right? We don't know what to do. Our system is overloaded. And then when you look at it from sort of like that physiological standpoint, it's like now you're in this, like, you're freezing basically in your business because you're just so overwhelmed by all the things that are going on. And that to me is where I think procrastination starts becoming a more interesting conversation, because there's nothing wrong with you if you're procrastinating. Like, it's not like you're broken in your business. I think it's just that overwhelm, and being aware of it really changes the dynamic of how we show up.
And what are your thoughts in relation to, because I know, and I'm glad that you brought up the energy piece too, and being in alignment and where your energy is being distributed, right? But my other question though is, let's just say hypothetically, energy is good. We've got a great mindset, right? Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. We're in tune. We've got insight. We're rocking and rolling this. How much, though, can procrastination at times also look like and or be a form of self-sabotage?
Ooh, good question.
Well, I think it often can be. So to kind of take a step backwards, like Betsy and I have, we're business coaches and we'll always label ourselves as that, but we spend a lot of time in terms of the tools that we use in our business coaching for ourselves and for our clients in a more woo and energetic space. So in particular, we use human design. And we started our human design journey in like the two of us individually and in our business probably about 4 years ago. And then we've slowly integrated it more and more into the business with working with clients and then, talking about it more publicly. And the really cool thing about human design is that when you start to pinpoint, like we have clients who come to us and say like, I'm procrastinating, or like, how do I discipline myself to show up more consistently on social media? How do I, and that procrastination / discipline / motivation, like they all get mixed in together. But really, these are very distinct elements within your human design. And so as an example, if you look at like your ego heart center, that energy center in your body, it's undefined for 70% of the population, which basically means that 70% of the population does not have a consistent and fixed access to willpower. Only 30% of the population can literally will themselves into doing something right here, right now, and it's in alignment for them. The other, the other 70% of us, it comes and goes. That motivation, that willpower will come and go, and that is actually correct for us. And so, even just using that one energy center as an example, a lot of times we fall into doing things that are not in alignment for us energetically because we're trying to force ourselves. We feel that we have something to prove. We're trying to prove our worthiness. We're trying to prove that we belong. We try to prove, whatever it is that you're trying to prove in your business. And so you end up forcing or pushing yourself. And then when that doesn't feel right, we self-sabotage, because of course it won't feel right for 70% of the people. So then we self-sabotage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
We self-sabotage because we're forcing. And then what happens? Well, but because we're in a culture of busyness, we need to always look busy and always be doing something that, air quotes, moving the needle forward.
Yeah.
Then we get busy doing other things. And then we circle back and we're like, my God, on Monday, I said I was going to do this thing and I told myself I would do it. And now it's Friday and I haven't done it. And then there's the shame, the guilt spiral downwards.
Like,
my God, I procrastinated again. And, a trick with that shame and that guilt spiral too, is that you're like, but I'm also exhausted. Like I've been really busy all week. I've done things. I just didn't do that one thing that I said, or I told myself I would do at the beginning. And so that's really for us where the juiciness and the magic can unfold in a coaching container with a client, because we can start to pick away, like, was that thing that you set out to do on Monday actually something you really want to do and it's really in alignment with what you desire? Or were you willing yourself to do it because you see other people doing it, or you think it's something that you quote unquote should do? And so that's why, we say like procrastination is almost never laziness. Like I don't know anybody who's lazy anymore. We're all so busy, and yet we're also procrastinating. So, and that's where that trick is. It's like drilling back down into what is actually energetically correct for someone. And we're all unique and different in that respect.
And so it can appear to be self-sabotage, but if we strip it back and we look at it from a human design perspective, like you're saying, is 70% of the population naturally will do that due to not being in alignment, X, Y, and Z, right? And so I know we're not talking necessarily about human design today because we're talking about procrastination, but I'd be curious to know, just so that the people, again, have a small introduction to human design. Can you, in 2 to 3 sentences, and I know that might be exceptionally hard because it's a very big topic, what is human design? Because I just want them to I'm all about planting the seed on the podcast and allowing people opportunity to hear of new things, and that it might not work for one person, but it could work for someone else. So the fact that we have talked about it, I think would be really great to also, as we've defined procrastination, how can we define human design?
So human design is actually an energetic blueprint. And the way that it came to be, it's a mixture of a bunch of different modalities, energy modalities, where the stars were 90 days before you were born, where the stars were the day that you were born. It ties in the Kabbalah, the I Ching, the chakra system. And basically what you do when you pull your chart in human design, you're given an energy blueprint that tells you how the energy flows through your body. So we have a friend, AC Brown, she says, it's like the IKEA manual for your energy. So if anyone is curious about it, you can just Google human design free chart and start digging in there. But it is definitely a fascinating energetic modality to introduce into your life.
But again, though, and that's what I was saying earlier on, is we sometimes are in procrastination daily, right? But we can have more control of it if we have more insight to it, right? Because if we've got more insight to our energetic blueprint, we've got more insight about how that impacts our decision-making process for what we want to do and not do because of an alignment, surely then life for so many people would get better, right? Because it's like, who wouldn't want to be able to understand those patterns of behavior and why we do things and how the energy contributes to those decisions, right? So again, I know we could talk about human design for a whole other podcast, so I'll try and bring it back. But yes, I'm actually having a human design done consultation in a couple of weeks, so I'm totally all over it at the moment. So yes, so you mentioned really quickly about this essence of busyness, right? And how the world is really kind of shoving it down our throats. Really, if you look at it, it's kind of everywhere. So how does this kind of epidemic of busyness play more into the procrastination?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I think, procrastination in this sense, the way that you're asking this question, like, what does it mean? It really represents what they call present bias, which is our brains are hardwired to show up in the present moment. And I think when more and more things are added to our plates, you're talking coronavirus, you're talking lockdowns, you're talking building a business, taking care of the kids, making dinner, what we're trying to do in the moment is really make ourselves comfortable in the moment. When we're overloaded, when our sensors are just being bombarded with information and things around us, what do we want? We want relief. And so present bias can lead, it's the perfect example in my opinion of procrastination, because what it does is we stop future casting. We stop looking to the future and what we want to be creating. And we get so stuck in the present moment that we're like, I just need to feel a moment of calm in the chaos right now. And in order to do that, I'm just not going to do this thing. And so then that thing gets put on the back burner. And then that's when the procrastination loop starts, because it's like, I need to relieve the pressure in this moment. I need to feel good right now. I need to get this thing off my plate. And I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. And what happens with that is, when we start procrastinating little things that are actually important in our business, like doing your finances or,
Yep.
setting up a cart so you can sell your program and take the money in. Yes, there's a fear of failure. I think there's a lot more fear of success with women entrepreneurs in many ways, because it's like, well, if I get to this point, then what's going to happen? How am I going to navigate this? Can I handle that next level of pressure? And again, it comes back to like how we feel in the present moment. And I think for such a long time, especially as kids, we were told like, think to your future. What do you want to be when you grow up? And, vision board, vision cast, what you want to do. But I do feel like when things start taking off in business and things start getting like momentum and you're like, whoa, and you're kind of holding on for dear life, that's really when I see the procrastination start sinking in, because it's really that feeling of safety in the moment that we're seeking so that we can like calm down, take a beat. But then we get stuck there. Right. And so it's funny because even when you were talking about human design, like I've seen women use human design as a way to procrastinate, right? They had to learn something new. So they put other things on the back burner.
100%.
Anything can be that trigger for procrastination, but it comes back to having that awareness around, okay, things aren't working right now. Why aren't they working? And then taking a step to, I don't want to say remedy this situation, because I think a lot of times we procrastinate on things that we don't actually necessarily need to do. We're telling ourselves we need to do, like Laura said, but there are certain things that we procrastinate on. And it's just having a moment of compassion with yourself and looking and being like, okay, we're out of alignment. Like we're not really going in the direction that we set out to go in, and tapping back into the intention or the why behind why you're doing something. That's a really easy way to pull yourself out of procrastination and put things back into perspective.
Absolutely. And I think there too, when you think about perspective can be such a beautiful thing. But in the world of busyness, often we don't have time to just sit and reflect, because we have time to sit and reflect too. That can also put people into like these uncomfortable zones, right? Like, oh, the shit isn't actually going the way I want to. Whereas if I keep busy, things will just kind of feel like we're all going on. An example I use is I had to get new accountants this past year. And one of the things that I've been wanting to do for a while is implement Profit First into my system with finances. And the Profit First, for those of you that don't know, is just this really cool system where you just have different buckets of money and how they get distributed based on certain percentages in your business. And really it allows you to have growth financially. But every week, because I do this inside of my paid groups, I let everyone know what like I'm working on every week, so they too can see what I'm working on, and then I do a follow-up Friday. And for, I reckon, 16 weeks minimum, the same task about setting up Profit First was sitting on that list. And the girls were like, Ange, when are you going to get to this? Like, you got to, and I'm like, yes. And I knew it, right? For me though, it wasn't that it wasn't in alignment. So that's what I'm curious to know a little bit more about this particular situation is it wasn't that it wasn't in alignment. I actually really want to do it. And now that it's implemented, the benefits have already been amazing after just 4 weeks of actually having everything done. But for me, I also have florid ADHD. And whenever something's really hard, and not hard as in like difficulty hard, but hard as in like, I'm going to have to use a lot of my brain power on shit that I don't want to have to go and do, such as like I had to go to a bank, open up 5 more bank accounts, rename my bank accounts, switch things with Xero. Like it just was like draining for me. How much of that then is connected with that human design element, right? Because it's like, I knew I was procrastinating, but it was actually very well in alignment. But because it was like a boring tasks that I needed to do, that's where I was like, just didn't do it. So what are your thoughts about situations like that where it is in alignment, but the procrastination is still there?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that, I don't necessarily view it so much as like a human design thing, because you're right. It was in alignment with you and it felt really good. And, human design helps us like find our authority, and we can ask ourselves questions, and there's different ways to do that. But, to stay on topic with the productivity and the procrastination piece, procrastination is about emotion. It's not actually about productivity. Mm-hmm. And we make it that it's about being productive and like all the tasks that we have to do. But emotionally, there was something there that was like, oh, this is going to feel like a lot of work, and mm-hmm. It's okay to have those moments where you're like, oh my God, there's so much going on. Yes, it can totally be in alignment. But if emotionally you're feeling that resistance, or you're feeling like you're not ready to go and do it yet, or, it's going to take a lot of time and energy and effort. You could have just been tired, and it was like underlying tired. And that's the beauty of our brains, right? Like our, mm-hmm. the brain works in mysterious ways, and it wants to protect us and it wants to keep us safe. So I really look at it like procrastination has nothing to do with productivity. I mean, it does, because at the end of the day, we need results in our business. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, to me, the root of it always goes back to the emotions and, what's driving us behind it. And so, yeah, I think we can totally be in alignment and still not do something. You know what I mean? Like we can't, mm-hmm. there's always something more to it in my opinion.
Yeah. And you mentioned, totally love the brain, right? And you mentioned it just briefly. So I do want to just touch upon that. How does our brain and the wiring of our brain impact or not impact procrastination?
I think it's a huge player in it. It's probably mm-hmm. the number one player. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing with human design is that it really shifts us into a new paradigm in terms of how we make decisions and what is actually, the parts of our body and our energy centers that are actually allowing us to get things in motion, mm-hmm. to get things started. What's, what is motivating us, not motivating us, and where we source our energy from. So the interesting thing about, our heads, our brains, your crown and your anja, as it's described in human design, it's like those are sources for inspiration mm-hmm. for your crown, whether it's defined or undefined, and your anja is like your viewpoint of the world, your judgments, your opinions, and your viewpoints. So we have this head, and I always like to think of our heads as like an information highway. Like mm-hmm. For me, I have an open head and an open anja, so it's like it's just information highway, lots and lots. I can receive so much from the outside world coming in. And for Betsy, she has a defined crown and a defined anja, so she is the source of her own inspiration, and mm-hmm. she is the source of her own opinions, judgments, and viewpoints. But the difference is like we use that data and we take it in, and it brings us awareness, and it brings us just information, mm-hmm. but it's not where we make decisions. We make decisions with our inner authority, which is located like down in our bodies. Mm-hmm. And so that's the biggest shift, I think, is like it gives us permission to be present in our bodies and actually make a decision that feels in alignment energetically, as opposed to letting our heads take over. Because if I use myself as an example, I'm a generator, I'm a sacral authority, and I have, an open head and an open anja. I mean, I can, and Betsy could attest to this, like I can very easily just spin in circles. I can see ideas, other people's viewpoints, get inspiration externally and be like, oh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And almost become obsessed mm-hmm. with something, but then never actually take action on it. Because I'm still turning it over and over in my head. Whereas if I tap into my inner authority, and drop down into like what actually feels good for me in my body, what is my sacral excited about? What am I getting lit up about? Mm-hmm. And let that be the decision maker. Let that cut through the noise. And the analogy I always use is like, imagine if instead of a brain, you had like an iPhone stuck on top of your neck, mm-hmm. right? Your iPhone is amazing. We can Google anything. We can retrieve any piece of information that we could possibly desire in the world. And that's amazing. But your iPhone doesn't make decisions for you. You make the decisions. Mm-hmm. And so that's really where it's like you can, when you identify that you're procrastinating on something, it's first like allowing yourself to sit in the uncomfortableness of that moment. Like just pause, give a moment to the uncomfortableness and let it be there. And it will physically feel uncomfortable in your body. It will feel almost panicky, maybe even in your mind. And then bring awareness to like, okay, like let's start to use this trigger to become an activation for ourselves. Like, what is it about this thing I'm avoiding doing that's triggering me? And then you can ask questions like, is it really that? Do I really want to do it? do I really have to do it? Is it, am I doing this because I think I should? Am I doing it because I saw someone else doing it and it seemed brilliant for her? And I want a piece of that brilliance for myself, but maybe it's not actually in alignment for me. And so you can start to use that trigger as something, to go deeper within yourself, tease out like what's really happening here. And when you bring awareness to that, then that's when you can use your authority to be like, oh, I see what's happening here. I was inspired by what she was doing. That's a really cool direction for her, but maybe it's actually not correct for me. And we can use our inner authority to suss out what is the correct course of action, what would feel good. Because when it comes to building business, 6-figure business, 7-figure business and beyond, there's 1,000 different ways to do it. And all of them are correct. It's just not all of them might be correct for you. And really that's what is so, when you look at someone else's business and you're like, God, she is just on fire. Look at her killing it. She looks like she's having so much fun and things just are flowing and it feels good. And look at the money that she's making. It's because she's probably tapped into what is correct for her, what feels good for her, and she's flowing with it and she's giving herself permission to do things her way. Mm-hmm. And so then there's that reflection for all of us. It's like, how can I do things that feel in alignment for me and stop shaming or guilting myself for not being at the same, at the level that someone else is at. And instead like come back and reflect on what is the correct and fun and aligned course of action for myself.
Mm-hmm. No, I love it. And again, that insight though, right? Like I've been taking insight perspective that the more you're aware of this, of what again is alignment. And I think a lot of women get stuck in the business and don't have time to ask those questions that you have, given to us today, right? Like we just keep jumping from one thing to one thing to one thing. And that's one of the things too, that when I work with women, I'm like, is what you're doing even fun anymore? Is it bringing joy anymore? Or are you just doing it because that's what you're reading on the internet to do? And people are like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. Like people lose out of joy, but because they've never actually sat and paused, regardless if it's in a procrastination, do they love it? Do they not? Is we're in this world of busyness. And so again, the importance of just being able to slow down and life collectively can be really powerful for, where you're choosing or where you're, steering the ship next. Now, one of the things that I am curious about is you guys have worked with a ton of different people from around the world and from your lens with human design, your own experiences, living in different parts of the world, what is the real reason that people avoid getting things done?
That's a great question. I think the thing that I see the most, I really do think overwhelm, especially in the last year, has been so prevalent and so invasive and just so there because again, it's sensory overload. Like I sound like a broken record on this podcast today, but we have so many things coming to us at any given moment. And, sometimes when you have too many options, it's really hard to pick an option. And that's why we love using human design because it does give you that roadmap and it does give you the ability to check in with your authority and really like figure out what's true for you. But I also think that there isn't really the space to contemplate. There isn't the space to pause and consider. One of my favorite things to do is to stare at the wall. Like, I love it. Like, I mean, it sounds so indulgent. And at the beginning that seems so indulgent, but it's not. Like, it's so necessary. Having space to rest, to recharge, to just not use your brain is super, super powerful. And, is lying down for an hour and like doing nothing in the middle of the day productive? It actually is for me, especially based on my authority, especially doing the type of work that we do, and allows me to show up at a higher level. But at the beginning, that was a really hard conditioned thing inside me to understand. Like I was very type A. I was very go, go, go. Like I worked in New York City for 12 years. I worked in fashion. Everything was 24/7. And so I do think that there's this paradigm shift around what is acceptable, how to lead with your energy first instead of your brain. Because your brain's always going to tell you to do things, right? It's always going to fill up that space. It's always going to want to seek out more, but sometimes less is more. And that's a really hard mindset shift to make at the beginning, especially when you're trying to build something from nothing. Right? It's like, I'm building from nothing. There should be no space. I should be filling it. I should be going, like hustle. Like that's why our name is Luscious Hustle of our business, because yes, there's this hustle mentality that we live in, but there's also these incredibly luscious, divine feminine moments that we can have throughout the day and in our lives. And it's really learning how to redefine what a hustle is in 2021.
Mm-hmm. And I just think a client of mine, she's from How to Live Slow, and she's all about slow living. And she said when she first started really trying to just slow down her mornings, slow down her night times, just slow down the business so she wasn't working as much, and just a variety of little things, right? Is again, that busyness that we're competing with the rest of the world though, right? The busyness of other moms when we're at school pickup and school drop off, the busyness of what other people are doing. And one of the things that I would say is if you can focus on your own lane and again, just sit in that moment, again, you being able to slow down can be one of the most beneficial things that people can do. But again, because we've heard things like if you slow down or don't do this, you're lazy. And then that shame and guilt loop that you guys talk about comes into place. And it's really hard. It's almost like so counter intuitive, right? Because we've been so conditioned and ingrained to do one thing one way that to try and do it the opposite, it does take a little bit of time and willingness to be able to start making some changes. And when you start to see people from a human design perspective, again, and I'm bringing up the human design collectively though, when they start to get that insight as to what makes up their energetic blueprint, what are some of the shifts that you've seen in women, or some of those like aha moments that they get when that happens?
Well, I think, and Betsy touched on this, it's like starting to actually give yourself permission to live in your feminine. Like there's a lot of talk on social about femininity and, being in your feminine energy. And often I find a lot of that is directed towards the visual of femininity, but then also like self-care. And self-care is another one of those funky traps because it actually becomes another thing on the to-do list often. That is just like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to do self-care. And then it doesn't quite happen. But yeah. I think, and then becomes another source of shame and guilt. But we are really stepping into a new paradigm. Like up until now, most women, even women who have been incredibly successful in their businesses, and I'm not saying this in any way to take away from the tremendous success that they've had, but they have done it in the masculine of doing. Mm-hmm. And we see other women doing, and they've reached high heights in their success. And so then we look at that and we think, well, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I do the way she is? Mm-hmm. And I think too, oftentimes we will label behaviors as procrastination. And it's like, it could be just genuine procrastination, or it could be that we're actually being, it's like the universe is throwing up like an energetic block, an energetic safeguard, be like, actually, this is not the correct path for you. Yeah. And then of course there's that overwhelm piece that Betsy talked about. It's like, I'm just going to block you from doing that right now because it's actually not in alignment for you. And there's actually, consciously or subconsciously, you're being pushed to take a step back and to give yourself space, because in the feminine is being first. Mm-hmm. We be first and then we do. And I think there is a shift happening away from feeling like we need to build our businesses from strictly only in the masculine. Mm-hmm. And there's this invitation to be like what Betsy said, like, can you just lay on the floor and let yourself decompress for an hour and trust that is productive and call it productive? Mm-hmm. And really, really own that and feel it and feel good about it, as opposed to be like, well, I took an hour to my day because I was just really exhausted and I was kind of overwhelmed. I just need to lay on the floor for a little while and we'll call it meditation. And then I don't feel like, I'm losing out. Like, can we really own being in our feminine and giving ourselves that space and trusting that that's correct for us? Mm-hmm. And that's not procrastination. Like, we actually are doing that for our higher good.
Mm-hmm. And again, so many things we could talk about higher good. There's a million different things, so I'll try and do it. But for those people that are sitting there going, okay, procrastination, yes, I do it. Yes, I have it. Yes, it's part of me. Now I know a little bit more about the blueprint, energetic blueprint that you guys are talking about, etc. For those people who either choose to start exploring more about human design, and maybe those who are like, no, not ready for it yet, what is just some really simple, I know you guys talked about asking some of those particular questions early on in the podcast, but is there any like 5 steps, 3 steps, like what advice could you give so people can start to either have insight or start to acknowledge, or whatever that is, to start to get them out of the procrastination when they now know that they're in it?
Honestly, I don't have like a 3-step process. I think I have like one thing. Just be kind to yourself. I think that there's so much pressure to be perfect in today's society. And I think with, social media and all the filters and everything that goes on, perfectionism is like a real thing. It's like a disease. It permeates into everything that we do. And the thing that I've been focusing on this year, the most this year, is just being gentle, being kind, but also forgiving myself when I mess up. Like if I'm procrastinating, because, again, the mind is so smart. It can tell you that you're doing this for this reason, and it can write a whole backstory. And the next thing you know, you've like written a novel about why you haven't done something, and you're like cooking cookies instead of doing, the books or whatever. And I just think in those moments of awareness, we need to celebrate more the moments of awareness and not shame ourselves for not doing the thing. And I think when we can start stepping into a greater sense of awareness with compassion, it's amazing how quickly you can break that habit loop, or you can break the cycle of just feeling so down. Because again, it's, do you want to be spiraling down into the depths of despair, or would you rather be spiraling up and expanding in the energy of just like releasing things and letting them go and allowing the process to unfold? That's really what I wish I would see more of, is just people being more compassionate, more gentle, and then also forgiving themselves when they mess up. It's not about being perfect. Perfection will actually keep you stuck in place longer.
And forgiveness. A good friend of mine is Denise Duffield Thomas. And one of the things that she talks about in Money Boot Camp around, shame around money and things like that, is one of the first exercises she talks about in her program is around forgiveness. And a lot of us never take the time to actually truly look at what about forgiveness. Again, people could say, well, you have to add it to the to-do list. But there's something really, when I went through the process, there was something quite magical just sitting in that. Forgiveness of myself, forgiveness of other people, forgiveness of a variety of different things, and just letting go of that and being okay with that. But through that, I also was a lot more kinder to myself, right? Going, well, hold on. Yeah, there's a variety of things, right? But it was really great. But again, I had to sit. And I'm with you, is that busyness is often, like you said, that I laid down on the couch, and then they're labeling it, but it was meditation, almost like just sit and be, and that it's okay. But yeah, the power of forgiveness is, I think it's crucial in life, in business, and also just for our self-love. One of the things I talk about with the women is they'll say, well, what is, Angie, I'm stumped with this, or I'm stumped with this. But we're also forgetting to love ourselves, right? Just loving ourselves for who we are, embracing some of those procrastination things, and just being who we are. So, and for you, Laura, I'd love to know what, Betsy talked a little bit about like compassion and just being. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Betsy and I have both been on a forgiveness kick, honestly. And I will be the first person to admit, like, no one can be harder on me than me. I don't think it's possible for any other human being on the planet to be like as unkind to me as I could be.
I agree.
And so really, truly, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of women are like that. I think we're really hard on ourselves. And so it's just, stepping into that forgiveness piece, like forgiving the times when not even just in the moment, like looking back, like, oh my God, I was so hard on myself then and so hard on myself then. Like, can we let that go and forgive the hardness of the past? And as you do that, you step into being kinder to yourself, step into recognizing yourself. I think, that's a big piece, in terms of social, showing up in your business, showing up on social media, wanting to connect and build your audience, build authority, sell, doing all the things. It's like, before we can receive recognition from other people, we have to receive it from ourselves first. And we can't expect it to come from out externally before we can recognize ourselves internally. And that is actually the work of the feminine as well, is like being open to receiving, and it has to come from you first. And that's been a huge piece in my journey, is like being more compassionate to myself, forgiving myself, finding that ease and that flow again. And it really just gives you a completely fresh perspective on life when it comes to actually sitting down to do the masculine tasks of the day, or plotting out the steps that need to happen to hit that masculine goal, but doing it from that, the masculine tasks and goals live inside the container of the feminine energy. So I have to show up really embodying that feminine energy first. And then I can start to sit down and do the tasks, the doing that's in the masculine, and trust that, if you don't hit that certain goal, that's not a failure. Like it's just not. You can take a look at that and look at what worked and what didn't, learn a lesson from that, and you keep moving forward. And, the feminine, it's like, she doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater the way the masculine wants to. If a launch doesn't go the way you think it will in the masculine, that the masculine wants to get hard on themselves, because they didn't rise to the challenge. Whereas the feminine can see the bigger picture of like, I'm on this journey of a lifetime. I'm always going to be evolving and growing. I am constantly on an upward spiral. And the goals are just the little check stops along the way. Okay, so I missed that one. That's okay. I'm still on my journey. I'm still growing. I'm still moving towards that bigger thing. You still get to be, that most luscious version of yourself, that strong, powerful, and, feminine woman, who's on her journey. And when you get better at being in that, practice really, when by better, I mean, just practice embodying that, then the goals, the wins become sweeter and the failures just become lessons.
100%. I preach that on here all the time. The mistakes, I don't look at them as mistakes. I look at them the lessons that we need to just keep growing and moving forward. And growth to me, again, isn't necessarily just financial growth. It can be spiritual growth. It could be, physical growth, mental growth, all of those things. But those are I believe they're like the little breadcrumbs that they give us to then be able to enhance, and look at things from a different lens. Now, for those, you guys have been in business, you guys have been rocking and rolling for a while, and you've talked a little bit about it, but I don't want to put words into your mouth. What do you both know now that you wish you knew when you first started out in business?
Oh, that's such a juicy question. What do I wish I knew? I wish that honestly, the forgiveness piece, I wish that I understood that a lot earlier in our business, because I mentioned earlier, like I came from a very corporate-y background where I was working 24/7, flying off to China at the drop of a hat. Like my life was not my own. And I think as we've built this business and we've redefined what the hustle looks like in 2021 and what it means to really create a business where you're leading with your feminine energy. I think I had to do a lot of forgiving of myself and forgiving myself for, buying into a system and a way of thinking that I just wasn't good for me. And so there's a whole new level of success that is unfolding now, and it's exciting and it's fun and it's restful and it is expansive. And it's so different than I ever thought was imaginable. So I
know for you, but did you, and how do I say this? For me too, is I have worked in the place of, do you know what I mean, masculine more than feminine. But how much of that do you also think that it's part of the journey because of that culture that we've been like so ingrained and conditioned to, right? Like for me personally, it's like people over the years have had to plant the seeds about, say, energy, healers, chakras, right? Like all of the kind of woo type of stuff. And when I first started, I was like, what the fuck are these people talking about? Do you know what I mean? Like it was so unknown, right? And I didn't say that they weren't true, but it was so unknown that I was like, are they speaking? Like, is this English? Like what? Like, and that's not like, it was such a foreign topic to me, right? But again, the seeds were constantly being dropped, kind of like planting a seed, and it was growing in me. And it's taken me, I've been 11 years in business in a couple of months. But it's taken me on that journey of what I've had to go through, and then inside, and now I work with an energy healer, and I'm getting my human design done, and I work with like a variety of different spectrums, body talk, and a whole bunch of different things. That's really only infused over the last kind of 18 to 24 months. And if someone said that I would book a human design call 24 months ago, I would have been like hell. That shit is never fucking happening, right? But because I've been exposed to it more and more, and the seeds have been planted, and I'm more open to it, right? Like this journey, like you said, it is much more expansive now. It is much more restless now. But I had to get there, and the seeds had to keep being planted. So that's why, like, when I was looking at bringing you guys like on, it was one of those things that I knew we could start planting seeds for other people. Does that make sense? And so my question to go back is, how long did it take you to start to be able to see the other side of things? Am I asking is that making sense?
Yeah,
it's taking me a while for me to come to the other end and start to embrace that.
So interestingly, I grew up in this world.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up from a very young age. My parents were very open about like other things, different modalities. I mean, we lived all over the world. We lived in Hong Kong when I was 6 and 7, and I started doing yoga back then. Like I've always had a meditation practice. I mean, I'm 42 years old. So, when you start doing yoga at a very young age like that, I mean, it was something that I brought into, I wanted to go to the Olympics, since we're talking about the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
I was a swimmer. That was a practice that I brought back with me, that I brought into like training.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think though that the norm, right? Whether we want to embrace the masculine or not, the norm is that we lead with the masculine. It is how society is built. It is built for men's energy cycles, which are 24 hours. They reset at the end of the day, but women, it takes us 28 days to reset our energy cycle. It's tied to our bodies and the moon and all this different energy. And so for me, I don't know. The moon was always there in my life. Human design's only been around for 5 years, but astrology was a huge part of my life growing up. I carried crystals when I was a kid in my pocket. For me, it was more of like a unraveling the conditioning that I got when I started to work. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this stuff was in the background constantly, kind of like running. And for me, the fight was just being open to embracing it again, but it was always there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess, maybe that makes my experience a little bit different, but I don't know. My parents were always really open about this stuff, past lives, Akashic records, like you name it. We talked about it at the dinner table. So aliens, I mean, it was a very different upbringing.
Yep. But again, and that's like, again, I think if you're exposed to it, like for you, like you said, no different, right? You're just like, this is how we rock and roll. For me, my dad's very farmer, middle of Alberta, meat, potatoes. We're talking maybe what happened on the farm that day, but that's about all, right? So again, I think it's only because I was exposed to it, say from the age of 30 onwards, and I had to work hard to learn it and start, and I haven't completely even mastered that at all, but like learn it, accept it, have insight to it, but then also not worry and shed what will others think about me, because it hasn't been part of me, right? And so it's like you have to go through this cycle of acceptance and in not grieve, but whenever there's loss, there is grief. And so I've also had to go through is like the loss of who I was and who I'm becoming, right? And I think people forget about that, and that it's okay to expand. It's okay to try different things. Again, we go back to about that alignment, right? It's now in alignment with me, but I'm also open to it, where it's taken a little while for that to happen. Do you have any thoughts around that, Laura?
I think I would just say, like our generation we are bridging like the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarian, and we're also like the millennials. Even I was reading an article about millennials. They're like, we're the one generation in the workplace that can bridge the communication and understanding gap between boomers and Gen X versus like Gen Z. Like we have lived in both worlds, and we are the transition. Like we're right there in the middle of it. And so I think it's just, you're right. Like having compassion for Betsy's story is unique because she did have a family that was like numerology and like all the things. My family's like a farming family. That was my grandparents, farmed in Manitoba, and my parents have very like traditional careers and traditional backgrounds and educations. And so it like the woo was completely new to me. The energetics was completely new to me. And yet we can I feel like we're positioned though also to make that transition or that transformation rather, like in hyperspeed. We can collapse time. And I think that that's really actually what's happening for a lot of us who are stepping into this space. And actually on that note, it's like to answer the question that you asked before, like, what would I do differently if what do I know now that I would do differently? I would give myself permission to not spend so much time thinking about the how and the why behind things, like why I want, as a generator with the sacral authority, I can want something and just want it because I want it. And I don't have to know why. I can trust that it's good for me because it piques my desire. And when my desire is piqued, that's how my body produces energy. I don't need to, my head will want to go down the rabbit hole of like, well, why do we want that? And is it good? And how will that happen? And can that launch really work that way? And like that's the biggest thing I've learned is like, I don't need to know why. And I don't necessarily need to know all 10 steps to the finish line. I just need to know that I want it and I desire it and that it feels good in the moment. And okay, what's the one next step I'm going to take that feels in alignment, and trust that the rest will follow. And that's been a huge shift for me. It's incredibly freeing. It's incredibly freeing when you get to do that in your feminine, and you have that sort of that paradigm shifter. It's like you said, there was something you said before that was, who we are right now in the present moment is the culmination of like all the choices and things that we've done in our lives. And so, you have made a step as an adult into exploring energetics, exploring different holistic modalities, different, ways of understanding the world. And so by doing that, you're actually like choosing to live in a different reality. Like you could have stayed in the reality where you stayed in Alberta, and you stayed in a certain town and did the certain things, and you could have lived that predictable lifestyle, and there's nothing wrong with that. That would have been a reality that you chose. Instead, you chose a different reality, as have I, and as have Betsy. And I think it's like when you start to wrap your head around, like there are multiple realities happening for you in the quantum field, and it's like you just get to choose, and that's really cool when you start to play in that zone.
No, I love it. I love it. And I love that we've been able to weave in so much of this other stuff too, other than just procrastination, because I don't think you can have one without the other, right? Like everything goes hand in hand. So I appreciate you guys willing to expand on some of these conversations today, because it will, again, start to plant seed for other individuals. Now, for those listeners out there that would love to connect with the both of you, how can they find you? Do you guys have anything coming up that you guys want to share with the audience? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so we are mostly hanging out on Instagram at luscious.hustle. You can head on over there and check us out. DM us, let us know what you loved from this episode and what you would like to hear more of. But also just head on over to our website, www.luscioushustle.com. We have an incredible Facebook group where we are sharing some free content, sharing some free trainings that are coming up. I don't have anything off the top of my head right now because I'm so bad with dates at the moment. But that is Level Up X Luscious Hustle on Facebook. And again, you can find all of that on our website, through our Instagram page. All the links are there, but we would love to connect with anyone who's listening to this. And if you have questions about human design, that's really our jam. And we would be happy to answer any of those questions for you.
Gosh, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate you both willing to come on today, talk about procrastination, give us some really cool and amazing tips and tricks on what people can do, but equally weaving in the human design part. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And for the rest of you, my team and I will also be putting together the show notes for this episode at angelahenderson.com.au, where we'll also make sure that we have all the links, URLs, handles to find the girls over on Instagram, etc. will be in those notes. And for the rest of you, I hope you have a beautiful day no matter where you are in the world. And I look forward to you joining me again next week for another awesome episode of the Business and Life Conversations podcast. Thanks again, ladies.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for listening to the Business and Life Conversations podcast with Angela Henderson. www.angelahenderson.com.au